Thanks, Mark. Well, good evening, everybody, to the Power Hour Tech Talk for October 2025. I'm very pleased to welcome Brandon, Z6 Lima Zulu, or 7 Papa, 8 Lima Zulu. Sorry, that was just trying to get the digit. 7 Papa, 8 Lima Zulu, and Matthew, Z6 MDV, to the Tech Talk this evening. They are going to take us through the Lesotho DXpedition, where Brandon hiked over the mountains, although he's left me with a seed of doubt now because of what he did in the army many years ago, that he went, he took a shortcut and then sat there giving radio reports. So we have to just check whether he was actually where he said he was, Christy. Then just to give a quick intro, if you have a look at Brandon Z6 Lima Zulu's QRZ page, you will notice that he's got a paragraph there on the Lesotho 2025 SOTA Micro DXpedition. And just in summary, this was a 6-day expedition sponsored by Biano Power, covering over 100 kilometers on foot, unsupported, along the remote mountain border between Lesotho and South Africa. For some of the peaks, Brandon did have 2 porters that went with him to share the load. They ascended over 5,000 meters in height and activated 8 10-point peaks, all with a 3-point winter bonus. 6 of them were first activations, and he gives the actual peaks on the website as well. And given the lack of cell phone and internet coverage, further support was provided by Matthew, Z6 MDV, or 7 Papa 8 MW, operating a base camp in Lesotho in South Africa. And then there were several chasers who were also giving updates on the WhatsApp groups so that we could chase Brandon and know when he was hitting those various peaks. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Brandon. Brandon, please take it away.
Thank you, Keith. And Alan, who's also a Drakensberg hiker, is not able to make this evening, so I've got no one to fact check me to your point, so I can get away with just about anything. I'm just going to share, if I may, my let's share my screen, make sure I've got the right thing there. Yeah, good evening to everyone. And it's just, Keith, maybe you can just tell me if I do anything that the slides are coming up. Is that look right?
Yeah, we can see the slides, Brendan.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yeah, thanks for making some time. Actually, sort of, Matt and I've taken a while to get all the stuff together. It's been a bit frenetic since then. I'm going to just start off with a little section on some of the preparation for a trip like this. I'm going to hand it to Matt, and he'll pick up the narrative in terms of the beginning of our little expedition. I'm going to take you over the mountains. I've got lots of pics. I'm going to move them through them quite quickly. It's more of a slideshow, and I think for a number of the people on this call actually chased a lot of those activations. So this is more, I think, the purpose to show you what was happening on the other side. Just a couple of thanks before we start. Citadel were not able to make this. They've got a Hamnet, I think something on tonight, but a massive thanks to them. I mean, they were able, almost in secret, to go and get the. They worked massively overtime with the SOTA guys in London to get Lesotho registered. So at the last minute, I mean, I was going to do some of these peaks without actually making them official SOTA activations. And instead, we were able to actually, activate officially. Then, sort of big thanks, obviously, to Matt, who's going to come there. It was I wasn't clear in the beginning that I was going to have support close to me, and it made an enormous difference just having a companion, even when I was away for like 6 days. Just knowing that there was someone who was just basically always there was pretty cool. And then I think to Christy's on the call, Keith, Graham, I'm not sure if he is. Who am I missing? And Mark, 6MDX, for providing an enormous amount of support, from a distance in terms of the spotting and alerts and what have you. And then also from a DX point of view, Fox 5, Papa Yankee India, Lawrence, Larry, also a whole lot of help there with the POTA stuff, and I'm still a little bit behind on the admin there. All right, so no further. Oh, let me see, why is this not advancing? Of course, it won't work when you actually put it up. It'll work all the time right up until that point. Let me just have a look here. There we go. All right. So also massive thanks to Bayer Power. It's actually, I put a mail out to the guys and I needed new batteries, 4 of these. And I'm just guessing, I think with import duties and transport costs, probably about 20,000 rands worth of batteries, 4 of these, which was just a welcome relief in terms of the financial pain. So very, very grateful to them as well. Okay, so just I think in terms of planning these parameters, the biggest risk is you just dive into the detail and you start off with the detail and try and work backwards, and it tends to be chaos. So I plan these things in pretty much the same way as I plan anything or do things in business, and spend a little bit of time speculating why you actually want to do it. What is the purpose? What do you want to get out of it? How is this going to transform me and make me, in years, down the line, think about it and, sort of it's meaningful. And then taking that purpose, setting up proper goals, and then you start working down the pyramid. How do you resource for it? What kind of support do I need and who? And what are my constraints? When am I going to be able to do this? How does it tie into everyone else? So start high and then go low. And the next sort of phase is feasibility. So you're going to take your purpose, you take your objectives, and the next thing you've got to map and trying to find a set of peaks that fall inside those parameters. These peaks don't have, by and large, there are 2 peaks that I did the Hodgsons that had been done before. They actually sort of hike quite frequently. You can get information on them, but for many of the others, there's absolutely zero internet, information, pictures. So you're using things like Google Earth, which is really, really useful, but has limitations. But you've got to work out whether you can physically get up them. Can you climb them? And if it's doubtful, how are you going to assess them? Can you put the routes together? Terrain feasibility. It's not all about the peaks; it's the intervening terrain. Can you cover it in sufficient time? And then evaluating the schedule. Is it reasonable what you've put together? And some days definitely are, and some days are a bit stretchy. And there's no doubt a couple of those days will be speculative, and then you need contingencies. And then just evaluating your resources. What do you actually own? What's the gear that you don't have? What is going to be the cost in terms of accommodation and porters? I'll talk about the porters a little bit later. Is it financially feasible? The planning, I'm not going to go into the detail. I mean, everyone seems that we're talking, Keith, about a little bit of military stuff. I think anyone who's ever been in the military sort of becomes a bit of a closet wannabe, expedition mission planner. And, I don't know, I get a lot of satisfaction on planning stuff. So, you develop those detailed schedules, logistics, what do you need in terms of transport, accommodation, equipment. Equipment's not just radio equipment. I mean, you're up in, it's high altitude, it's cold, the weather is massively variable. So what is the mountain gear you're looking at? And then spending a lot of time on safety. I mean, you can really create margins of safety, but you can also do stupid stuff that can make a small emergency into a big emergency. And what is that safety group? What is my communication link going to be? And then ultimately contingencies. What if that happens? What do we do if that happens? And just a little thing. I mean, I'll talk about later when we talk about that stretch of Drakensberg. There are not too many escape routes. Yes, there are some passes that you can get off the mountains, but they're also very, very remote. I mean, you're several tens of kilometers away from, even if you get down the passes to where you're going to find helpful humans. So, you're going to be pretty much self-reliant. So those contingencies are important. And then, the stuff that you consume, you got to take up food for 6 days plus a margin, and then power. You're obviously running GPS, you're running radios, and you also need to run your comms. You're logging on your phone, so it's very, very easy to bump into constraints there. And then physically, I mean, your biggest safety margin is going to come from physical margins. So if you're going to walk 20 Ks in a day and things go wrong, can you walk 40 Ks? And your biggest safety margin is just knowing that you can if push comes to shove. Right, so when you say start off the map, I mean, there's the high berg surrounded by Lesotho, lots of red dots. The red dots are the 10s, and we want the 3 bonuses. But now we need to find out how to stitch them together. So you find little areas where you can zoom in. And this was the area between the Topasani Pass all the way across to Giant's Castle. There were 6 peaks in that zone, and they all had never been activated. But seems though and those are all in marked in yellow there. But seems though you're at the top, there's an opportunity to do the Hodgson's Peaks. And the first day was quite nice because you can go and test your gear if there's anything wrong. And thank goodness we did, because we had issues with the batteries, but it wasn't the battery's fault. It was probably my fault, which we remedied. But then you're at 8 peaks, and then there's obviously in purple there's Tabana Netlanyana, which is it's not a technical mountain, but at just under 3,500 meters is it's the highest point in Africa south of Kelly, and Kelly's pretty much on the equator. So it's a nice thing to do. You know that you're the highest person in Africa south of the equator, and you're on the top there. And also just in terms of the thrill of being on these peaks and knowing that the Earth's been here for 4 billion years and no one has gone and spoken to people around the world from there. So there's a novelty factor for all of these things. So you add in Tabana Netlanyana, which didn't know was going to be a SOTA peak until later. Now you got 9. So what do? Then there's one more peak past the top, which was Durnford. And Alan actually did me a big favor by activating it, because it was unactivated when I started planning this, because it made it easier to make some decisions a little bit later when things don't go exactly to plan. Using Google Earth, are things technically feasible? And you can only go so far. The Google Earth, these are interpolated from photographs that by and large are just taken from vertically above. So there's the algorithms that work it out. This was KN020, which is it's essentially, you can see it's like a blade. And you're not sure whether you can get up or not. So you work out that I can get to a certain point. You can see where those white lines go, and then when you get there, you'll figure it out. You're not entirely sure whether you can or can't do it. And here's the actual this peak later, and I'll talk about it. And you get to a point, you say, I can see a way up, and you do things slightly differently to what you planned. And ultimately, I activated on the that little green dot at the top. But Google Earth takes you quite a long way. I mean, here's another one. This is the peak I did straight after this, Ngakwa-Madola. And this is what you're able to get from Google Earth, but somewhere in the shade there, it's not clear whether that's there are cliffs all the way around. And then you see this one potential point of weakness, but it's not 100% clear from Google Earth that you are going to get up there. So some of the stuff is a bit speculative, but you know where to go and look. I know that I've got to get to that part of the mountain to go and check that it works. This was another one, 016, the tent, and it's got rings of sort of concentric rings of cliffs around it. And I'll tell the story a bit later. You do find that there's one place. You say, if there's a place I can get up here, it's going to be at that spot. So that's where you go and look for it. In terms of then the route feasibility, you've got to go and take all the peaks you've identified. You've got to draw lines between them. You're cognizant of the fact that those are GPS lines, and GPS lines are not how you really walk stuff in practice. But you've got the beginnings of feasibility. You've got to know how quickly you walk. You've got to know how quickly you ascend, and you've got to build in certain buffers. But that's how you start building your routes. Then you build out in detail. It's every single point on the map, and then you start estimating those distances. And what I actually did is I took the GPS distances and I added a factor of 15% in terms of walking in the real world, and it actually turned out to be an underestimate. There were days, that second day I'll talk about, I mean, my straight line GPS walk was about 17 Ks. The actual walk distance was about 23. And a lot of that's just got to do with really steep slopes that you don't remotely go straight up. You walk a zigzag to get up there, but at least gives you something to start off with. What is very accurate is the ascent. I mean, after the whole thing, I expected to do 4,500 meters of ascending and about 100 Ks of walking. And I think literally I did 60 meters more ascending than the planning. So if you do your planning properly, you can get quite close. And I worry more with SOTA about my vertical distance that I'm covering, and the horizontal stuff, if you fit enough, you can just keep walking. It's not an issue. This is going into the planning of the logistics. I'm not going to take you through it. If anyone wants this, by the way, I'll happily share it. Share these lists. But just to mention that there are actually 120 items on that. And you think, well, you're carrying all the stuff in your backpack, or you're sharing some of that obviously with the porters, but stuff that you're actually physically carrying to go and tick off 120 items on the list. And it's so easy to forget it. And some of these things, if you forget just one thing, it's going to create problems in your life. So checklists are important. And then there's paperwork, there's passports, getting a radio license. This is just mine and Matt's, our 7 Papa licenses. But there are also things like getting through borders with the right papers. Matt was driving my car out of Lesotho just to make sure he's got all the right paperwork, etc. So this is just a little bit of picture of hiking. Ironically, you think about you're out there at night, and Matt can tell you it's quite chilly. You've got the rivers and water freezing over at night, and I can tell you I was too hot in my sleeping bag. I stripped down until I was literally in my underwear, and I was still too hot. So I've got a whole range of sleeping bags, and I just thought it was going to be colder than it was. and I got hot, and that's even with, you know, -5 degrees outside. I should have had the intermediate sleeping bag, but inside there you got your shell jacket and pants, tents, and you know, your sleeping pad, which is warmth, all your cooking stuff, all in that list. And then here's the radio. From a radio point of view, went for 100% redundancy. I didn't want a single point of failure. So, and that's also where the, you know, the porters were quite important. I can talk about the porters quickly. It's not just there to help you carry stuff, so you're spreading the load, but it's also to allow me to ascend those mountains and leave gear at the bottom. So if we had to carry all our packs up to the top of every mountain, and particularly the steep stuff, you're going to go slower. It's going to be a bit riskier and all of those things. So the, you know, having someone at the bottom who can sit with the gear, you get someone who can come up with you if necessary, you know, makes a huge difference. So 2 radios, the FT891 up to 800 watts. The backup radio was the Elecraft KX2, so a QRP radio, but only weighs 350 grams. Never took the digital, so the we decided to leave the FT8 stuff behind. The 4 batteries, carried headphones. You get into DX, it's like literally, it's going to be a 5 times, 10 times success multiplier by having you know, headphones versus trying to listen to that stuff, especially in the wind. And yeah, just doubled up 2 antennas, 2 coaxes. Didn't want to be repairing stuff. So I had everything in full redundancy. And then you got to work out your food per day, etc. Some of the little electronic stuff. One of the most important things is a little buck converter. It allowed me to take the voltage from the batteries down to the level of most of the device I need to charge. You can't charge your cell phones directly on that, but you can charge your power bank. So all the extra juice that I had from the radio batteries enabled me to keep everything else charged as well. The medical stuff, people say, oh, you're overdoing it. It's not a very heavy pack, but trust me, you're so far from help. If someone gets gypo guts and things like that, I've been up there where I got a little thorn prick in my finger once, and it went septic, and my finger was like a friggin' pork sausage. You know, without antibiotics and whatever, you've got big problems. So actually make sure that that is quite comprehensive. And taking photographs. I know people store sort of, you know, instructions. I don't want to carry all the boxes for drugs and what have you. So I've got a photograph of every single thing that if I need it, I can refer to it without carrying it up there. From a training point of view, I actually didn't train particularly deliberately. I mean, I do a bit of riding and running anyway. But by far the most important thing is actually leg strength. So my climbing, I spend, from a rock climbing point of view, I spend 2 days in the gym every week. And that is 100% the most important thing I did in terms of just building that leg strength that you can go up and down all day. But running is good for your lungs and stuff, but it doesn't necessarily make your legs strong enough. So climbing is a goodie. All right, I'm going to stop at that point. Sorry, Matt, let me stop sharing because I'm past the narrative. Sorry, let me just kill this. How do I unshare? I seem to have made a bit of a mess of this. Stop sharing. There we go. That's a little bit about the preparation. I'm going to pass to Matt just in terms of the start of the expedition.
I'm still muted there. Okay. Skip that. Okay, Keith, could I ask you just turn that down a bit? I can still hear the echo. Okay, everyone see that all right? Okay, all right, thanks for that, Brandon. Yeah, just a little introduction from my side on what I'm going to be talking about. Obviously, as Brandon mentioned before, I was helping a little bit with the support and logistics mainly, helping get his vehicle to and from and being close by. To assist should something go wrong. I couldn't carry him off a mountain, but I could at least phone someone and ask them to go and carry him off the mountain. It started quite a while ago when Brandon's been talking about this big grand DXpedition / 10 peak challenge for some time, and I gave him a call, I can't remember, many months before this, asking him, sounded like a great plan, and I kind of phoned him up and said, Brandon, do you need some help? I think he was a little bit reluctant at first, but I kept promising grand plans of assistance and all the good whiskies I know, and eventually I convinced him to let me tag along. So yeah, so my plan was obviously just to travel with Brandon to assist and support, operate from Lesotho a little bit my side, and then come back to South Africa and just help. We had backup satellite comms, VHF, UHF. I was always on HF monitoring and standing by, and then obviously, of course, eventually to to pick him up. So yeah, thanks very much, Brandon, for letting me tag along and enjoy the adventure. Okay, so this is just, I'm going to show you a little bit leading up to Brandon's first walking day off from us, just a couple of pics along the way. And we'll head back to Brandon for the bulk of it, and then I'll share a few closing pics from my side. But yeah, this is the border post gate at the bottom of Sani Pass on the South African side, if you haven't seen it before. And this is it. Of course, and as I said, just to be there to help support Brandon on his travels. This is all my gear before I packed it in the vehicle to take it with me. My two operating radios was the ICOM 705 and the Yaesu FT891. I predominantly use the 705 with the mag loop antenna, which you'll see quite a bit in the photos, for quick field deployment. Brandon and I were in very close proximity to one another. So being able to be on HF within a few minutes with very little effort was quite helpful, because VHF, UHF didn't always work, although seldom actually worked. Although we were close, the terrain didn't lend itself to those bands, so HF was the way to go. And then, of course, all the water and food and all the bits and pieces we needed while we were in Lesotho for the time that Brandon wasn't hiking, took all the provisions for that as well. I also note here using the laptop for logging in comms, you'll see that as well. During our last field day, we used a logging system. I'm trying to remember what it was called, N1MM logging system. It's actually been a phenomenal system, so continue to use that. So Brandon and I left, packed up his house. You can see him on the right there, packing all our gear in, heading down. Our first stop was Nottingham Road. I can't remember the name of the hotel, but we stayed at the hotel there by Nottingham Brewery. And this was us on the first night, full of excitement. I still remember going down some of these dirt roads. I can't remember if it was on the first or second day. No, it was on the first day, and Brandon was eyeballing every mountain down this dirt road, saying, maybe that's a SOTA summit. I think once or twice he pulled the cell phone out and thought you'd do a quick pre-trip SOTA peak, running up and down, just from the excitement of what was to come. So this was, you'll see many pictures, and I've left many out of us having a lot of beers. But this was the first night at the brewery, enjoying some pickled pig, if I remember correctly, and a good dinner. The next day, left early. We decided to, we only left Monday afternoon, late afternoon. That's why we traveled into the evening. We decided to leave early Tuesday morning from Nottingham Road and tackle the pass early in case there was any weather or any traveling issues, but there wasn't. So for those that have also been, unfortunately, these photos of Sani Pass really can't do it justice, and especially the last 200 meters is absolutely spectacular up there. And anyone who's been to this, the pub, as they call it, the highest pub in Africa, although I think that's been contested, it was heck of a windy. I think Brandon estimated close to gusting at 100 kilometers an hour when we got up to the top. Brandon opened his car door and it nearly ripped clean off the vehicle. There was even a sign there said, beware of the wind, reverse park your car. We didn't see the sign at first, but that would have slammed the door shut instead of ripping the door open. But it was bitterly cold for the bulk of the time that we were up there. I don't know how Brandon says he was warm in a sleeping bag. I'll show you a little bit later on our little stone, very primitive rondavel. But yeah, good beers and pizza to be had. Yes, and of course, 1 or 2 or 3 or more schnapps along the way for that bitterly cold wind out there. Okay, here's a couple of photos. The top picture here is a little panoramic view of our little stone hut. We stayed in this unit over here overlooking the mountains. Absolutely stunning. Water freezing at night. We only probably got running water at 10, 11 in the mornings. We only had electricity between, I think it was 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. and showers are really an evening situation when there was a bit of water. But yeah, absolutely stunning from up there. This is inside a little rondavel, very basic, a little bathroom off. You can see off Brandon's shoulder there on the right, toilet and shower with sporadic hot water. We had two little hookies. He had his little waist-high walls separating us. I had the one on the left, Brandon had the one on the right. We had kind of a communal area there. We set up our field station and operated. I think the first night, the guys knew that we were on. I don't know, we made probably well over 100 contacts that night. You can see on the bottom right there, the kitchen. That was what we had. They gave us a fireplace and they lit the fire every evening with very few logs, and we had warmth for about an hour, and that was it for the rest of the evening. Bitterly, bitterly, bitterly cold. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Brandon. You can take it from there.
Thanks, Matt. Did not exaggerate the alcoholic start of this trip, but it's quite important because you know there's going to be a big gap in the middle. Let me just share. There we go. All right, so just let me know if you can see my slides coming up.
Slides are up.
Okay, awesome. Right, so the first day was actually, as I said, it was a nice little trial day. There are 2 10-pointers in there, which Sid and Dell, and I think Lucas and Magda actually done, I think, 2013, maybe again later. But just nice because this one is going to start and finish at Sani Pass. I was going to be able to spend the evening back at the Stone Lodge before the actual walks started. And yeah, if there's any little glitches, you can you can pick it up and iron it out. This sort of route there, sorry, forward that there. Right. Yeah, so you can see Sani Pass to the left. I mean, I think most people are quite familiar with the Berg in general, but what you can see in terms of the lighter sort of terrain to the bottom, that is actually on the escarpment. That's the Lesotho side, which actually sits at about 2,800 odd meters. And then what you can see in the terms of darker green is that very dramatic drop off into KZN. So if you're looking back to KZN, what you're going to see are these towering cliffs that literally extend the whole length of the Berg. So that is the first 100 meters of about 100 kilometers. So you've got 99 kilometers and 900 meters roughly to go thereabouts. And this Matt is where Matt sort of sent me off. Spectacular vistas, and you got to remember that when you're on like deadlines and timelines, whatever, just to stop and smell the roses, and metaphorically and more specifically, just stop there and have a look at these unbelievable views. And that's somewhere on the way up, looking down to the KZN side. That wind that Matt was talking about, I think by and large we had a couple of days of not great weather, but by and large the weather was okay, but the wind was just a constant factor throughout. This is the lower slope of Hodgson's north, so the actual peak, the first peak is up to the left. But what you can see on the right-hand side there is the second peak of the day, and that's Hodgson South. It's KN011, I believe. But what you can't see is off to the left there is just the massive drop-off. So that goes all the way down to KZ. It drops several thousand feet all the way down. And then, that is just getting up into the final slopes of Hodgson's north. And it's probably a little bit of a sense of like why you walk further than you think you're going to, and maybe it doesn't really show the slope, but you just don't take the tiger line up these things. You do a bit of zigzagging, and it goes a little bit easier. And I think this pick was just topping over there on the shoulder, so just below the summit, and just suddenly realizing, I spoke to Matt on 2 meters. I said, "There's no way I'm getting an antenna up on that. This wind is just insane." And you might have on your sort of maps, it says it's going to blow 40 knots, right, which is about 80 k's an hour. But that's just general. It doesn't count for the fact that the wind has to bend around these mountains, and the sort of Venturi effect means it accelerates massively. So, what I realized there is you've got to search around these mountains. You've got to find little places out of the wind. You can see still at that point, you're walking and you're still fully dressed. I mean, there's a fleece under there, plus an outer layer and your beanie on. So, the temperatures are quite low. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. So, you just get out the way. There are a number of peaks here where you're just a couple of meters below the summit. The top of your antenna is peeking out, and based on the direction the wind was going, prevailing one is you normally got the ZS ones on the other side of you. So quite gratefully, at least you're some wire sticking out. But the views, you're sitting there and you're speaking to people that you're very familiar with, and just sort of saying, "Geez, I wish you were on this side," and you can see what I'm looking at, and these wonderful, wonderful vistas. And you just set up wherever you can, and do as best as you can. And so this is, I think, after the activation, I went and actually played around on the top there, and these cairns of rocks are left there by 80 years of 100 years of hikers going up, and the size of the cairns tell you how popular places are, actually how easy they are. When you start getting to mountains that are a little bit trickier or a little bit more remote, you'll see the pile of rocks is much, much smaller. But this is actually quite a popular peak. In terms of that first one, it was very early in the day. So the DX, a 10-meter band with a little 6-meter pole, you don't get much DX on 20 meters. So 10 meters is your go-to band, and obviously that early in the morning, there's not a lot, but you do get the stuff out to the east. Disappointingly, no VK, but nice to pick up Japan there and some of the bigger stations in Europe coming in. So 61 QSOs, actually awesome because South Africans, that was a work day. It was a Wednesday. So it's amazing how many guys actually came out and did make contact. Right, so then the next thing was back down again, and this was the next peak in 011, and just the next peak is getting close to the top. Interestingly, I probably chose to go the wrong way. I actually went around to the right out of the screen, and I climbed up the other side. And then you know you're doing something wrong when you know people hike the thing, but you're using your hands. You know you're actually now rock climbing, which means you've done something wrong. And I topped out. Then I realized there was a gully between me and the main peak, so I had to down climb it and then walked around the back some more and got up on a route that was fine. But the actual way you meant to come up is on this side. And if you can see my mouse, it's like down here. And so you'll see that on this one, I didn't even get pics of the activation because the mist came in so quickly. It was a scrambled pack up of the antenna. And when you're coming down here, it doesn't really help to have your GPS and those things. What you look for is these little isolated rocks that someone has put on top of another rock. It doesn't look natural. It means you're probably on a route that someone has been on. That's the summit pick. Like they're really beautiful little cairns, actually stacked nicely. Views from the top down into KZN, spectacular. All these basalt, it's the same chemical composition as granite, just forms on the surface, a little bit more friable. And then you're sitting busy activating, and before you know it, just straight over the back of you, this mist comes. You didn't even see it coming. So you set up quite quickly because you've got to get down sometimes some steep ground, and you're doing it with less visibility. And that one, Jesus, just in the middle of it's a 58 QSOs, so between the two peaks, like about 120 on a weekday, good SOTA activation. 11 DX there, and then absolutely shocked to find my battery died. I mean, with these exact batteries, I've done 3 back-to-back activations with a lot of contacts on 100 watts, no issues. And I don't know what happened, but they were brand new batteries. Charged them at home. I thought they were all full, and very, very luckily, because if I hadn't, we'd be in trouble. Charged them again that evening and got about an hour and a quarter, hour and a half even into some of those batteries. They performed absolutely flawlessly. I didn't think life before batteries should have been an issue in that, but they were perfect. But thank goodness, found out that there was a problem before we actually settled from the main bit. And then that evening back with Matt, had a wonderful conversation with my ZU son that evening. It was lovely to hear him on air with Ryan. And next day was when it all started. So this was the pull up to the next day was into Lesotho, is going to be activating that highest point in Southern Africa, which is 7 Papa Bravo Bravo 001. It's the highest peak in Lesotho, and actually, as it would happen, probably the highest, well, definitely the highest SOTA activation in Africa up until now, even though it's not a particularly difficult mountain. So the day turned out to be about a 23K walk. We changed plans a little bit, and 1,000 meters of ascending. What people often forget is you always look at the 1,000 meters going up. It's actually the 1,000 meters going down on the other side that works the legs harder than actually ascent. So that was the route actually at the end of the day, and I'm not sure we made the right decision, but the porters wanted to go up this valley here, if you can see my thingy, and actually leave the bags, the heavy bags over here and walk up. I originally planned just to go tiger line straight up the side. So maybe it was an easier walk, but I think it did cost us a lot of time, which means we started later, which meant I ended later, and actually had to cut a few things short. So I don't know if we made the right decision. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But that's the beginning of the day. So on the left is Spamantla. He's about 34, I believe. And on the right is Pilo, who's 23. So we had a bit of a difference of experience here. We definitely had some language gaps. Which was quite funny on the first day because I was sending messages by InReach and I was saying, oh shit, here we go, excuse my language, here we go again. When I did Champagne Castle the previous year, my porter turned out to be a lot less fit than I did. I ended up carrying all the gear that I gave him. And these guys kept stopping for rest. And I thought, oh, here we go again. It turns out they were resting because they thought I needed the rest. I thought they were resting because they were tired. Anyway, it didn't take long. We figured out that everyone was fine, and from that point onwards, we were all good. That's the last little haul. So what we actually did is I thought I was going to do all the peaks on my own, but actually how it ended up, the guys were keen to carry. So that's just the radio gear and a few other tops. So one of the guys would stay at the bottom and have a bit of a sleep, and this is Spamantla going up with me to the top there. From just below the peak of Tamananetanyana, looking right to the end, that's the last peak. So right at here is Giant's Castle, which is at the end of the hike. So you can actually see several tens of kilometers, and you can see the pics a bit blue, but could see right to the end. There's the little summit, says you're the highest point of Southern Africa. And yeah, I had exactly the same setup. I was able to get sort of 4 or 5 meters out of the wind below the summit, just below the ridge. Again, no pics because unfortunately running so late. I was an hour behind time. So I stopped on exactly 100 QSOs. The DX was still working, so it was a great pity. 59 DX from the top there. Given the time of day, a lot of the European stations, a lot of Russian stations, funny enough. And yeah, tip of South America, Patagonia, and a bit early for the Americans. If it's later in the day, those guys start coming online. But awesome to be sitting there on a midweek activation, get 100 contacts, and you're still going strong. And that's coming off. Lovely weather. The wind was pumping, but that would be in the distance there. That's Kilo November 013. Obviously, this one, when I was in Lesotho, activated as 7 Papa 8 Lima Zulu, and when I was on the South African side of the border as ZS6 Lima Zulu. And where we needed to get to was the sort of the base of there. So another 7 Ks of walking or thereabouts. And then this was getting just about to our campsite, and that was the first peak for the next day. That's 020. That actually, funny enough, the activation spot is inside Lesotho. Actually, interesting conversation with Sid beforehand, because the SOTA has a rule that if the peak is a South African or any country, you need to activate on the using the call sign of that country and in that side of the activation zone. And it was actually plainly impossible with a number of these peaks, because the safe side of the activation zone was in Lesotho. And I said, Sid, I don't know what to do, because it's illegal for me to sit in Lesotho and activate my South African call sign. And very gratefully, Sid engaged with the SOTA guys and the rule number 15 or whatever it is, and they changed that rule. They sort of they overlooked that or changed it. I don't know, but I did the right thing, which is using the right call sign inside the activation zone, regardless of what the summit reference was. So that was 020. That's the first peak of the next day, and then I could from the campsite I could see the second peak as well. So I knew that was number 1, that was number 2, and then there was a third peak further along. And then just looking back, and that's the way we'd come from the escarpment, these massive basalt cliffs. Yeah, the little tent is up. There's Spamantla in the background. You go to bed and the water is still flowing, and you wake up and it's all icy. But this was probably the best weather we had of the whole trip. It was the only occasion when I was able to cook my evening meal without having to do it inside the tent out of the wind. So it was quite balmy. And yeah, it looks quite spacious there. The actual width of the tent is just over 1 meter at the bottom there, so the camera's made it look bigger, but actually 1 meter wide. It is a 2-man tent. Technically, there's no way I'd use any of my 1-man tents to get all that gear in, but you can see it all piled up there next to me. So the next day, the 2 peaks I've already mentioned. There was a third one, always going to be a bit speculative. It was going to be depending on the amount of time available. So the third peak was probably the most the least impressive of all the things set up, but the plan was to actually get all 3 done and then get to the tent, and there you can see the route, first peak, second peak, this little third one, but then quite a long walk, including going over a ridge there, and this ridge is not a SOTA peak, but actually is bigger than the so you actually have to walk up more over there than you would have had to get up that mountain. So this was going to be a pretty tight day. Glorious morning. I sort of say the weather's really good, but it still ices over, and you can see not dressed in all the gear that I was the previous day. Looking back, these wonderful views. And then yeah, this is the final sort of slope up to the top of 020. Got onto the top there. I don't know if you can see Pila there. His eyes are massive. This guy was not enjoying he wasn't enjoying the steep stuff. He was holding on very, very tight from his perch there. He wasn't keen to fall off. That little spot behind the next photograph, I think one of them is actually taken after where I climbed the little rocks behind there. I think there's another picture of old Pila there smiling for the camera. So the next one is that I climbed that little thing behind him, and then looking back, and what you can see here is the Google Earth pics didn't lie. There was actually a little patch there, barely wide enough for the guy ropes, but that it could take the take the antenna. And you can see as I mentioned earlier, the more scrambling there is to be done, more road to peak. The pile of rocks are very much smaller. That's many decades of people ride. So people go up there, but not as much as the more popular stuff. And you can see the antenna up there using all the space. And again, wonderful to get all the contacts so early in the morning. You put your radio wherever you can. There are no comfy things. It's not like POTU where you've got a table and a chair and a sunshade. You just sit wherever you can. And I use the headphones throughout. Contacts there early, which was quite remarkable, was the only little DX that came in there. I think there were 2 DX, only one showing there. The one was Fox 4 Whiskey Bravo November, who many of us know. He's actually a prolific chaser, a wonderful station in France. But the DX there was, I think, on 20 meters, and I very seldom get 20-meter DX on that 6-meter pole. But this guy was on holiday and he had an antenna hanging out of his window, and I think we were both just as surprised as each other to make that contact. Yeah, and then having done that, heading off to the next peak, having a little bit of breather on those slopes. Again, you don't really see how steep that is, but you zig and you zag and you get up there. I showed you in the beginning that Google Earth where you sort of not quite sure from the satellite photographs where there's a weakness. And as you get closer, you can start confirming, I can see grass and I can see that is doable. Now you know that the activation is on. And then from the top, getting onto these things, you just get these little surprising vistas. I didn't stand close enough to the edge there to really give you a great picture. But if I'd taken a couple of steps forward, you'd have seen that the drop off through these cracks is all the way down. I mean, it's hundreds of meters and then, thousands of feet down there, just absolutely spectacular. And that's again, one of those smaller piles of rocks. All right, and this one I had Spamantla with me, set that up. These guys were actually at this point getting very, very interested in these contacts. They couldn't get their head around the fact we're talking to everyone around the world. And a good day. Unfortunately, had to call it at 50, and that was just because the time pressures. There was a third peak involved and a long walk after that. And on these things, Sid Nadal, you can see on the right, they've included a table, and they're very, very a little bit of initiative. They actually pushed out the SOTA weekend for another weekend, and I think this was probably switched over the week with this, I can't remember, but it was a weekday, and I was able to get them on one of the other KN summits. And then over the weekend got a number more. But the DX is normally the casualty because I typically start, I go 40, 30, 20, 10, and there's a bit of logic to that. 40 is where you're going to get most of your local guys. The domestic chasers, it is a weekday. We've got estimates of time. The guys are working towards those time windows. So I prioritize those chasers first. One of the activations, I turned around a little bit. It was a mess. I started with 30. It didn't work as well. So I stick with the formula. So the very last band you go to is you get someone to put the alert up on SOTA Watch. But if you run out of time, if the weather comes in, you run out of batteries, typically it's the 10 meter gets the chop, and I put the chop in here at 50 QSOs. And then as I started coming off here, again, it comes over so quickly. Like 1 minute, there's nothing. The next minute, you got this mist pouring over, and behind that mist was the third peak. So I don't mind going up when the weather's good, and if I have to come down in the mist, that's just what it is. But I wouldn't choose to go up, any SOTA mountain if it's a whiteout and you're just doing it on your nav as on GPS. So the third one got scrapped. It wasn't much drama, to be honest, because I could see that based on the time, we're never, ever going to get that activation and get to the point I needed to be on schedule. So, much as it was the weather, I might have decided to scrap it anyway, just from a time point of view. Beautiful things. This is on the Lesotho side, these little streams. I didn't actually use filters or chlorination on my water. If I could see where the water source was and you don't have animals, there was no domestic animals here, no people, there's nothing. But when I started getting towards the end, you get domestic animals and the odd, bumped into 2 or 3 shepherds, then I started using chlorine, but that water's pristine. That is our night. So because I missed the third, it was the first activation, so we did 8 out of 10 in total. Got tense up, and this magnificent. So behind that white rolling cloud is this drop off that goes thousands and thousands of feet down, and it just rolls. It's like a wave. It just rolls over the veld at you, and absolutely stunning. And you try and get your feet off because fungus is quite opportunistic. So you try and get your feet, even if it's a little bit cold, your feet go blue. But you know, try and get your feet out of those socks, otherwise you're gonna have problems over 6 days. And yeah, there you can see that's a little bit of the arrangement, and yeah, it's quite cozy. All right, this would be like this. Yeah, that was in the afternoon, the start of the next day, and sometimes you don't really get the scale. That is not the SOTA peak. That is just the first mound you have to walk over. So yeah, your strength training is really important. You've got to be able to walk up and down these things all day without getting too fatigued. And that was the plan for the next day. Kilo November 050 ready. And you know, and then the plan was to do the tent, KN016, and I'll tell the story about that in a moment. So 2 peaks planned for this day. Yeah, quite a long day. I mean, this one again was an example of something where you're expecting sort of 15 odd Ks, but it actually comes in above 20. So the actual walk distance being a little bit further than the you know, further than obviously your GPS lines, that white line over there. So we woke up and the weather was very, very different. That wind was pumping, it was wet. But I actually found myself quite squeamish going to like sort of professional hiking outfits and asking them for the gear lists and knowing that their porters have checked everything. But if I ever do this again with porters, I will do exactly that. So our peeler there on the left had left behind his rain jacket. He didn't have a shell jacket. The guy was getting hypothermic. So actually we would have just put the tents up again. And this is where having a few extra things. So I gave him my poncho, which he then put on, and then I took his little blue cover. But I mean, that's a game, you know, when you're sitting there with temperatures at that level and you've got rain that is like freezing rain and wind blowing like that, you know, no shell jacket is just, you know, you can't do anything. So yeah, we would have had a problem if we didn't have a bit of redundancy there. Yeah, views of Giant's Castle from a distance, getting closer and closer. This is just, you know, cairns along the way. So why now all of a sudden there were cairns? We at this point just briefly joined the route that the guys who do the Drakensberg Traverse do, the Grand Traverse, and then all of a sudden you've got like signs of paths and you've got cairns. Most of the walking we did, there were no paths. You're just walking, you're walking open felt on the grass. But here for a bit we were on the route. And this is heading up to 050, and you just don't know whether you're going to be able to do it or not because the rain was coming and going. So you'd get drenched, and then there'd be a bit that's open, a bit that's not. But you know, we got to the top and got a window. While I'm holding on to my hood there, was just the wind. I've got a video of this thing. It's absolutely, I mean, again, yeah, 40 plus knots, that's 80 plus Ks an hour. But fortunately, on all the peaks, we're able to get these little places out of the wind. You know, you spend 10, 15 minutes trying to find a spot. And this one again, the top of the antenna sticking out over the summit. So had no problem getting the ZS1 stations and Namibia stations, even though they were kind of, you know, on the other side of the mountain. The guy's having a little bit of a kip while I was activating. I got a Japanese station here, and I pulled out my headphones so they could listen to an absolute amaze. And the youngster, Pele, he said, you know, I thought you were lying to me when you told me what you were doing with this radio stuff. He says, boss, you were lying to me. I said, now I believe you, but I still can't believe it. And yeah, that's the vista. So the rain is sort of kind of going. So this activation, I just had to call when all of a sudden the you know, heavens opened a bit again. And yeah, got Japan, got Europe, but by and large it was quite a hurried affair. The nice thing was it was able to get. I actually can't see. I got Graham and Robert. They activated GP019 and got Sid and Adele there as, oh no, sorry, yes, got Sid and Adele there, also summit to summit, and lovely to be able to get that in. Yeah, that's the way down to the tent. So you've done your 1,000 meters of ascent, and yeah, I can absolutely guarantee I find it a hell of a lot easier walking uphill than downhill. And this is the stuff that jars your quads and your knees. So you've done all the up, and now you got to do the down. And in the background there, top left, so the weather's still coming and going, you've got the tent. The tent is the biggest small mountain you'll see. It actually looks small, and that's the tent. And when you get on, it's a lot bigger. But the thing that you're looking at are the rock bands that go all the way around. You don't need a rock band to be 20, 30 meters high as a cliff. I mean, if you're facing a cliff that's 3, 4 meters high and it doesn't have any handholds and whatever, you know, that's a proper barrier. I wasn't carrying any ropes. These guys couldn't belay me anyway. So anything that looked like a vertical rock climb was was going to be a problem. All right, there's the tent again. You can see the weather. This is walking along the side, and you can confirm what you suspect. There's no break in the rock. There's no way to get up there. And then getting around to the north side, the Giant's Castle, and I've got the little red thing, and this is where it's you sort of smile to yourself and say, it's exactly what I hoped. I can see a little bit of weakness in the rock there. That's where I think it's going to work. But just as you do that, and the rain comes pouring down, so we decided to set up tents. Waited. I don't know how long we waited, but an hour or so, and then I decided to go. The porters in this case were not interested in joining me. They looked at those thingies and they stayed firmly in their tent. They were not keen to do any scrambling, and I certainly had no right to suggest that they join me. So I went up on my own on this one, but actually made a little bit of a mess. And I think the fact that it was a bit speculative, had a process for how we worked our gear and what have you, and managed to make quite a big mistake. So it gives you a sense of how things are bigger, and I might be able to show you, like somewhere down there, you'll see a little yellow dot, and that's actually the tent, my tent. And this is not even up the mountain. This is at the first rock band. That's that very, very first one where I showed the arrow. But that's the whole thing with the Drakensberg, the whole scale of the scene is just so much, it's magnificent. This is getting to the top, looking down, so all ready to go. I've got the pole up, got the coax in, plugged it into the radio, plugged the battery in, and then I started scurrying around for the microphone, and lo and behold, that was at the bottom. I wasn't unhappy about this. This was probably the silliest thing I did on the whole trip. The weather wasn't good. It was getting late in the afternoon. The thing that I'd scrambled up would not have been great if it was very wet. It's very, very easy when you're climbing up stuff to see where you're meant to go, but when you're on the top and looking down, it's actually quite hard to find the route that you took. So I'd taken a rock and I put the rock at the top of the place I came up, and lo and behold, I couldn't find the rock. So, had it been an hour later or whatever, had the light been fading, had it been wet, can't find the rock, it was, if the universe was looking after me, if I had an angel on my shoulder, it was to leave the microphone at the bottom and just actually. So this one I wasn't too upset about. I was thinking about Louis Boert at the Battle of Speenkop, and the British had taken the Kop, and he said to the burghers, he said, well, if the car key's on top, you'll just have to go up again and take it back. And I thought about that, and I said, well, listen, that's fine. I've climbed this mountain. I will go down the mountain. I'll climb it again tomorrow. Also an easy decision to make, because I had to cut out a peak. And what I would cut out is the very last peak that had already been activated. The tent was the first activation. So I just scratched and made a decision, and I wasn't unhappy with that. That evening, though, you are a little bit dejected because you feel stupid, that you've done this. I haven't made too many mistakes like this, but we do. Every single activator in the room has made a mistake that looks a bit like that. But I set up the antenna there and had a wonderful evening chatting to people, chatted to Matt, I think chatted to Mark, MDX, I think ZS5 Victor, Marioka chatted to, Esmery, I think I chatted to. So actually had quite a nice night, just, rag chewing when everything up until now had been pile-ups and very, very sort of quick, working stations quite quickly. And that's inside the tent. And that's how most of you cook, is you cook inside the flat. Just make sure you don't mess it up. You don't want to set your tent on fire. And what I had mostly in the evenings are these freeze-dried meals. They do cost you a little bit, but actually not too bad, but so much easier than having to go through complicated food preparation. And then the other bonus is the food's really, really good. You go and pick stuff, you're eating stuff that you'd happily eat at home. And then all you do is just fold that up and you pack it away into your rubbish bag and you walk that out. So every evening I had a proper meal, a freeze-dried meal. Okay, day 5, this is what it was originally going to look like. So Giant's Castle KN 004 was the billicky of the range. So that was the key thing. But clearly I had other work to do, and it's not on this chart. I needed to do the tent again. I needed to do 016, yeah. And what I was going to be cutting out was this one at the end. I'm glad we did. This is the top of the pass. It's quite demoralizing when you walk past the place you're going to be going down, climb all the way up, all the way down, then do the peak, and then all the way back again. It's like doing a mountain bike race, and you get close to the end, you can smell the boerewors and the smoke, and you can hear the music playing, and then the path takes you up another mountain before you come down. So it's not, I think the guys were quite grateful. So the plans got changed. Had to add in a peak on the side and had to take out a peak at the end, and that's what it looked like. So this is doing the tent again. And that was the little rock band. I said, you have to get over, and there's another rock band. Not a problem. It's just, this is the kind of stuff, it's not really, it doesn't count as technical rock climbing, but you just need to be careful. That berg grass is quite solid. You can pull yourself up on it. Don't tell anyone, but it actually works quite well. But a lot of the stuff, when you're high up, again, not technically difficult, but the consequences of messing it up are quite big. So just off the side here would be a huge drop down into the KZN side. So you just have to work quite deliberately, particularly if you're taking out your guy lines and your guy lines go quite close to the edge. Just being careful that you don't inadvertently take a step back in the wrong direction. That's the summit in the morning. Lovely, lovely top off. So it wasn't too cold that day, and got it right the second time round. Made all the contacts, but when you're chatting to guys and people I know well, there are a lot of SOTA chasers that I know very, very well, and you sort of say, I wish you could actually see what I'm seeing right now. A couple of DX early morning, but also got those, and I can't actually see here. I'm assuming it's Citadel. My thing is covering that thing, but it is Citadel. Got that summit to summit in as well. That's walking away from the tent. So this Giant's Castle is in front of me, tent is behind me. That was the route that I took up through those rock bands around into the top, and you could see it a little bit easier from a distance. And then coming up in front was Giant's Castle. We did have some communication difficulties with the porters. They Zulu, and I don't understand a lot of Zulu, a little bit, and they understand a bit of English. And quite often they got confused about what my intention is. So this is a part of the berg that they know very, very well, because they've walked it once or twice with Grand Traverse, but they didn't always understand that I wasn't going where they usually walk. And sometimes like, oh, geez, we've gone actually off route, because they were confident that we go there, but my nav says go somewhere else. What I kind of didn't really look at carefully was just actually how much more walking I had to do from, the top of the pass around the back. The guys also stopped for lunch. And everyone's entitled to lunch, but they were taking their sweet time over it. And I knew the weather was coming in. I knew we were going to run out of time. So I left them both behind and just I did this one on my own. This is an interesting one, because I'm just showing you some big geographical features here that don't appear on Google Earth. You'll see something and Google Earth just smooths it out. It makes it one big shape. And then you go and do routes and you assume that you're okay. Then you get there and actually something is freestanding or separate, or there's a big ravine. Absolutely beautiful. But Google Earth is the most powerful, wonderful tool. But you've just got to know its limitations, and that the algorithms sometimes just make really big features disappear. This is the last pull up to the peak of Giant's Castle. To the left there is massive basalt drop off down into KZN. When I got to the edge there, I was able to get hold of Matt on 2 meters. So he was down there in the valley. It's the closest we'd actually been to each other physically, probably since when I saw him 5 days earlier. And then lovely walk along that summit line. This is looking north towards the sort of Cathedral Peak area. Beyond Cathedral Peak is Mweni, and then right up at the top you get to Amphitheatre. So that is kind of like we're to the south of all of those well-known things. And this is the last little bit to the summit. So you're well inside the activation zone. Clearly, the place you don't want to be putting up your antenna there is right on the top. It's very, very small. You wouldn't get it up, and it'd be pretty hazardous as well, and not a great space for radio. So that is the last little bit there to the top. Some big drop-offs. Again, not technical, but don't stand on loose rocks and lose your footing. Spamantla, who I left at the bottom and I carried all the stuff up, finally arrived after I actually got to the top. And I thought, well, that's not really of any use to me, but it turned out it was, because he grabbed the bag. We ran off that mountain. The lightning was coming in from the KZN side. The storms were rolling in from the Lesotho side. You could see this all happening. And I don't think I've ever got off a mountain quicker than that day. And I was very grateful to have him there. To carry that bag. He's a youngster, and I was literally bounding to try and keep up with him. And there you go. You can sort of see the light. You're at the level of the weather. I was speaking to Matt on the 2 meters. I said, Matt, is it raining on you? And he said, no, I'm fine, I'm dry. But I could see all the rainstorms on the KZN side. And if I look the other way, in fact, this is not quite into Lesotho, it is, but it's more to the left of this photograph. You could see the weather coming. Christie for Charlie Golf Romeo had also sort of shared some of the weather reports and the weather that was moving in from his side of the world over Lesotho. So I knew it was on its way. And then this was a nice day. Also this got cut short because of the weather. There was definitely the DX was still rolling in very, very nicely and had to cut it short. But nice to get the Citadel again. Got Piet and Esmery and Little Piet. That was fantastic. And then, yeah, that was a European SOTA station. Managed to get that as well. Just on the contacts, I was actually feeling very, very self-conscious about, working those pile-ups very quickly. People, and you literally call sign, report, and then next. And I'd say that chasers, by and large, were very, very professional. You get some guys who'll come in there and they're going to give you the grid square and all the things that you don't need and spell their name out. And it's just, it's fine. But you'll get one or two guys are asking about your operating conditions and your antenna, and you don't know how to. It's like, dude, you don't understand. Like, there's lightning on this side, there's storms on this side. I can't tell you about my antenna right now. But when I came down, I was quite self-conscious about, not really being able to always give people all the information that they were, looking for, unfortunately. So yeah, some DX in there. Now, this was actually the worst night of the whole thing. Because it started raining, we weren't able to get to our place we wanted to camp, which would be sort of a little bit of out the way. What you get is this wind that blows. Now, you can't see on the left. There's a big cliff to the left. If Alan was here, he knows that. And then to the right. So if the wind is blowing at 30, 40 knots, sort of 60, 70, 80 k's an hour, when it squeezes through those gaps, it accelerates to these insane speeds. I've got videos of that. That tent almost got blown flat on top of me. I have absolutely no idea how it withstood it. I've also got it the wrong angle. You can see it's almost sideways to the way the wind is coming. But the reason for that was when I put it up, the wind was blowing from a different direction. I had the back of the tent into the wind. But that night it was not pleasant. I wasn't able to make any food, so just had a chocolate bar too. And yeah, I was quite grateful to see the morning light and time to pack up and go, because it wasn't lacquer. Anyway, the next one is just basically walking out. It is 15 odd k's to get out there. But what you're dropping, and why it's actually hard work, is you're dropping 1,600 meters. You're dropping 1.6 k's, and that's hard on the legs. But we were in a rush to get to the beer, because I hadn't had a beer for 5 or 6 days. And I think we got down, Matt can check, it was just over 3.5 hours to drop 1,600 meters and 15 odd k's. But you can smell home. It's like a horse that can smell the oats. So we gunned it out. And that was, that's the route out. And that's the top of the pass, Spamantla. And you're looking back up the pass. And I'll show you in a moment. That is Giant's Castle in the background. And this picture is where we activated. That is that little pimple that you saw from the other side, and our activation spot was just slightly to the off. But it's really nice when you see the next day where you actually were. And that was the end of the trail. Kilometer or two to go, and Matt took this picture. We done and dusted. Time to move on. So yeah, 105 k's in total. What is it? It was 4,500 meters of ascent. This is a little bit by continent. So yeah, obviously the majority, you expect from South Africa, but also because we started on 40 meters, 40, 30, 20, 26 from outside South Africa, in Africa, a little bit of Asia, 91 from Europe, and then a smidgen from North America. North America is very good for SOTA if you're doing late afternoon activations, but did very few of those. By band, 40 meters dominates, not unexpectedly. 10 meters, just about a quarter of the contacts. 30 meters really strong. And the reason 20 is so low is not because the 20-meter band wasn't working, but I was, after the first day, I wasn't taking duplicate contact. So if I'd got the ZS1s on 40 or 30, it was only stations that I hadn't spoken to on 20 that we still picked up. So 20 just tended to be a bit lower. 34 DXCC entities. They're not all DCC. They're not all the entities. They actually converted some of those into countries. And then what I was quite interested here on the right-hand side, these are my all-time chaser QSOs. And the top 17 chasers that I've got in my log were all able to make contacts with me on the Lesotho expedition. So, we've talked about having dedicated activators. In South Africa, we really do have dedicated chasers who are amazing. And at the bottom here, you can see old Chris Fox 4 Whiskey Bravo November, very reliable with the station out of France. And that, I think, that is the story of what happened on top. I'm going to, if I may, pass back to Matt just to finish off and tell you what he was actually up to while I was gallivanting on the top there.
Excellent run through there, Brandon. Reliving the whole story again. All right, so I think this is where we last left off. Our little stone lodge, I think is what it was called now. Freezing stone hut. I get cold just looking at this picture. In fact, there you can see it on the bottom right. I eventually lit the gas stove and I was huddled over it. I was so cold. I think every jersey I owned that night I had on me. Yeah, okay, so this was the field station that I had set up the first day that Brandon had walked. He was still staying there that night, but his first 2 peaks. And this was my typical roadside setup. I had the ICOM 705 connected to the Alex loop mag loop over there on a camera tripod. What's great about the 705 with the built-in battery, super quick just to click that radio in the boot or on the passenger seat, run a little bit of coax and the antenna's up. This is a fiddly antenna to tune properly, but if you've used it a bit, because it's extremely narrow on the bandwidth there, very high Q antenna, but works remarkably well. So that was my little field station setup. You've seen this picture before, but yeah, that was me seeing the guys off at 8 o'clock on the Wednesday morning, I think it was, for the last time to see Brandon, I don't know, 5 or 6 days later. Okay, just a little rundown on every day, just to make some notes so we don't forget what we did. Here you can see once again the field station set up. Next to it, I think this was at the bottom of Sani Pass, had the 705 connected with a little bi-NO battery, a little 4 amp hour, I think it is, 3 or 4, and the laptop for the logging. Okay, and so a couple of more pictures of the travels. Like I said, the previous, this Ranger we're looking out to here, that photo was taken on, that's the highest point over there. The picture I took of that pass, absolutely stunning up there. Made quite a few DX contacts of my own from our field station at the lodge. But because the wind was blowing so hard, I took with a 10-meter fiberglass mast, which I couldn't put up. The wind kept blowing down even the 6-meter mast, so that on the linked dipole. But yeah, it was absolutely incredible up there. And then when the bands fell flat a bit, of course, a little bit of FT8 to keep things going on the quiet evenings. Okay, back down in South Africa side, a couple of pictures of the chasing. I think this was on the Saturday. There was a lot of SOTA activations happening that day, both Brandon and others. So that's why I had the 2 radios out, the FT891 connected to the linked dipole here, and the 705 connected to the loop antenna outside. As you can see, we even had cold, misty, overcast weather on the ground. This was at a farm in just outside of Heimville. Beautiful place, beautiful property, and morning QSOs with Brandon. My coffee on the bench outside. It was absolutely spectacular. And checking with Brandon and finding out what's going on, and I knew the route that he was taking, so it was quite interesting trying to picture this all in my mind and follow along. It was great. This top right photo was at Giant's Castle Camp, where I actually picked Brandon up. So the last night I spent here, and he arrived just around the corner down there, and he was activating Giant's Castle. Was up in the top right there. It was actually quite interesting, him talking to me about the weather on VHF, how bad it was, yet on the ground it was actually quite pleasant. It was strange looking up at the mountain range, knowing that Brandon was there, just couldn't see him. Okay, yeah, I really can't stress the wind and the cold. Brandon and I were looking out on that range that I've shown you, that panoramic picture from, when we were debating if it was water or snow. I can confirm it was snow because I came across it when I was driving up there. So I took the opportunity to write my call sign. You would notice it's white snow, not yellow, so I used my finger for that. And yeah, it was quite interesting learning about what we need to take with for future DXpeditions and what we plan to do in the future. So it's quite an interesting experience doing this little mini DXpedition. Of course, here's the photo of the guys coming off, and I think Brandon asked me 3 or 4 times on VHF on the way down, making sure if I did indeed have a cold beer in the cooler box waiting for him. I do clearly remember him asking me several times, do I have a cold beer? I did have water and Energade for him, but he really was interested in the beer. So picked the guys up, left the porters behind, their transport was coming, and we headed to Little Switzerland that evening. And of course, Brandon telling me all his war stories over many a cold beer. I don't even think we managed to check into our room. We went straight to the bar. Didn't make it for dinner. I think we ate dinner at the bar that night as well, at the bar counter. The beers were cold and Brandon's feet were sore, so we had to remedy that. So yeah, that was it, and many a cold beverage was had. So yeah, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to join you, Brandon, and to partake in this. It was absolutely an excellent adventure. I'm looking forward to the future DXpeditions we have planned going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I mean, just from my side, I mean, actually, it was so cool to actually have someone to share it with. I mean, there are a lot of SOTAs that I reminisce about and just think about how nice it would have had. I mean, so many of those are just solo, and it also felt very different on the mountain, knowing that Matt was there. I had his radio on. All I had to do was just basically plug in and he'd be there. So the companionship and the help was awesome. The hotel I've remembered now, the well-known one in Notties, is Rawdon's. And yeah, they've got their own brewery on site, so that was also very, very nice. Thanks, Matt. I guess, I mean, if anyone's got questions, I suppose either of us can take them.
I have a question, if I may.
Shoot.
So I did post it in the chat. I was actually going to ask Brandon, looking at the cliff terrain and remoteness of the location, and being as a medic as I am, what was your medical plan in the event of an emergency situation?
So, like, the medical evacuation is quite tricky just because of the altitude. So, funny enough, the only choppers that can actually really get up there are the big, the high end turbine stuff. So, the normal extraction, if there is an emergency, is by foot, and it'd be through the Mountain Club of South Africa, and they've got. So all those numbers are shared with, we had a safety group, which we had a lot of the Sandton guys on, and 1 or 2 others. And I've got in their list their protocols and contact details. But the reason you need to be very self-sufficient, I mean, the 2 things you need to do is, one is, yes, you should have all the medical stuff, but then also just be careful, right? Being careful with just not twisting an ankle, not breaking an ankle, because if you do, the consequences are really bad. I mean, so if you're stuck somewhere between Sani Pass and Giant's Castle, there is no quick extraction. I mean, in the old days, the helicopters couldn't get up there, but I do believe there are now, there are helicopters that are capable of getting you off. But it's also complicated. They've got into Lesotho airspace, and there's a lot of planning. So your main thing is to try and make sure it doesn't happen. You'll see in those in that medical kit, I've got so much extra things like Imodium. So Imodium is obviously, you got runny tummies, whatever. You got one person there who's now got the runs. So apart from dehydration, apart from whatever. So I just carry and my wife often does. She's a doctor, and she's got always this extra medical stuff. And I've just learned, you don't just carry medical stuff for yourself. You carry it for the other guys as well, because their being debilitated is just as serious to you as you being debilitated. So you just got to make sure you get it covered as much as possible. And then, yeah, don't do stupid stuff. Like, there's stuff that you can slip on and just mildly injure yourself. But if it means you can't walk, it's a big problem.
No, great, thank you.
Any other? Russi, you got your hand up?
Yes, sorry, just have to unmute here. Just a question about operating split. You haven't thought of that, or you're going to use that in future?
Yes, I think Yeah, so I think definitely, we've been talking about sort of overland DXpeditions to neighboring states. It really grabs me. Otherwise, not having to get on a boat and to go and take your trailers and there, it depends on who you sharing that with. So if you're sharing that internationally with people who typically would try and get hold of DXpeditions, then I think operating split, there's no problem at all. It's not the norm for SOTAs and POTAs. People very seldom do that. So given that a lot of the spotting, so as I said, Keith and Mark and Christy and Graham were doing a great job. I would sort of on 40 meters sort of say, can you go and post? It'll be at like 10:45. I'm going to QSY to 28 385 or what have you, and then they'll put that on the SOTA spots. And typically with those, you don't operate splits. I think that the problem would have been is just a lot of the guys chasing wouldn't have really been used to those protocols. But definitely, Rusty, I think when we start doing follow-up expeditions, not SOTA, but where we could be running power and doing whatever, then you've got to look at operating splits. But the pile-ups can get quite big. So for example, that Tabana Netliana, where I cut it at 100 and we were on 59 DX. At the peak of that DX, it's coming in really fast and furious. So it's a proper pile-up. But by and large, it's not that difficult to work. It's not the same as the guys who are doing these mega DXpeditions and Bouvet Island, whatever. It's still completely manageable, even though it's still quite frenetic. So as I said earlier, I think most of the people were very, very slick. There are guys who are not as used to that pileup who giving you more information than you actually really need, and that can hold things up a bit. But like 95% of it, 99% of it even was pretty slick. Yeah. Thanks. I see Mark's got his hand up there again.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask a question. Seeing as though you went into Lesotho, how many Lesotho QSOs did you get?
Several. They were all met. So bear in mind, they're basically no operators there, which is also why it's quite nice, because if you're operating your Lesotho call sign, apart from people chasing the SOTA stuff or POTA, I actually haven't really talked about POTA, but we actually did 3 or 4. I've still got to upload it. There's little problems loading my SOTA files into POTA. I've got to get around to it. It's been busy. But yeah, calling with, Matt will attest to it. You call that 7 Papa call sign, and it's really, it gets people attention. Even, running barefoot, breaking in, people hear that 7 Papa. Matt didn't mention it. Actually, we had one very remarkable DX. It was Larry, who runs a pretty big station in France there. But DX on 40 on that SOTA rig is really kind of unheard of. Your actual, it's a proper Envis setup for 40. It's probably with the bend of the mast, not much more than 5 meters off the ground. Matt, if I'm not mistaken, it was pretty much like a 5.9 contact. I might be wrong, but it was pretty solid. But yeah, no, you're the only 7 Papas in existence for that period of time. Yeah.
Then, Dieter, fascinating to hear about your trip. I'm curious about, over such an extended period, power management must obviously be quite on point. Obviously didn't charge anything. Did you budget to just have enough power so that you can just swap batteries without having to charge anything?
Those binos, and I'm not just waving the sponsors flag here, are amazing. And I know a lot of the guys have got them. I've got various sizes of them. Yeah, so apart from that little, I don't really understand what happened. I've been Googling afterwards about, sort of lithium iron phosphates, whether it needs, that now speculating they need a couple of cycles to get them full. They shouldn't really, but I don't know why they didn't. They didn't fill up. After we'd done it that night and recharged them, they were incredible. So, yeah, 4 of those batteries was enough. I was operating much lower power. Normally if I just do one SOTA, I'll just actually run at full power, run 100 watts. But I was running sort of between 20 and 30 most of the time for the domestic QSOs or the SATIC QSOs. just so that I had enough to crank it all the way up on 10 meters when I needed it. So that little buck converter drops the voltage down to I think 5.5. And from that you can charge most of your devices. You can't charge your cell phone directly. So I mean, I could have maybe done it more intelligently, but all I just really did is I ran the lithium iron phosphates through the buck converter into my battery bank and then charged my cell phone and stuff off there. So yeah, the 4 blue batteries that I took were more than adequate to run any. I think when I came back down, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I had like half my capacity still. I probably had 50%. I don't know that for sure, I'm guessing.
It might be possible that first night in that cold stone hut, that maybe the batteries got cold, and that's why they didn't perform as well the next day.
Yeah, the cold definitely won't help. But yeah, there was maybe someone can explain to me or give me some theories as to why we were able to still get so much charge in. But yeah, no problems with power. But if you didn't have the buck converter, would be really stupid because you'd have all this extra power sitting in your radio batteries and then sort of running down your battery banks elsewhere. So it was nice to be able to move it across.
Cool, thanks.
Just on that point from Dieter as well, Brandon, if I may, did you take any solar charging?
No, it's the funny thing is it's one of the reasons we didn't we set up all the FT8 stuff. And you just don't have time, hey? I mean, the thing is you're running on a schedule the whole time. The schedule's either to get to your next campsite, or your schedule's you got another activation you've still got to get in, or the schedule is because the weather is coming in. And when you're down on terra firma, in Joburg or Cape Town or whatever, you think about all the things you could do, whatever. In reality, you've got very little time to faff around. And there weren't many occasions where, those little portable solar panels, if you could leave them out all day, it makes a big difference. Yes, you can put them on the top of your backpack and all those things. But, I just did the calculus that I'd rather just have enough power and not have an extra thing to fiddle and faff with. And in hindsight, I think it is, the more you can simplify what you're doing, the easier it goes. It's very easy to create complex plans, while you're sitting in Joburg at home. And in reality, when you're on those mountains and you're against a schedule, you're against weather, you don't want to have to rely on that. I was far more comfortable that I could have just kept on turning the radio down. I didn't have to run 100 watts for DX. There was plenty other ways in which I could have conserved more power. But I mean, yes, those are options. I think those panels are getting more and more efficient, but no, I chose not to.
Cool, thanks.
Or any other questions?
I think I've got one last one, but this is for Matt, if I may. So Matt, honest question. How many beers did you have that Brandon didn't know about?
Not many, Mark, to be honest. We bought beers at Notties Brewery and to take into Lesotho. And luckily for Brandon, there was a couple left from the brewery that I brought back. So yeah, the consumption was quite economical.
So what I can add to that is it's quite surprising when you get down, because all you want is a cold beer. But when you actually get there and you haven't had I think it took me a long time to drink one beer. It was actually sort of you kind of think you're going to smash 3 beers, but you get down, it's like, Anyway, it was good. Yeah, thank you. I see the message there. Any other questions? If not, can I hand it back to Keith?
Just hang on a sec. Keith is just getting his audio sorted.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Brandon, and thank you everyone for attending the Power Hour Tech Talk this evening. I think it's an amazing adventure that you've shared with us So we get to also feel a little bit of that cold that Matthew was talking about. It sounded like Brendan was warm and cozy up there on the mountain in his sleeping bag, but everyone else was cold. But no, thank you very much, Matthew and Brendan, for the time you've taken to prepare the presentation and for giving it to us tonight. And a very big thank you to all that's taken the time out to listen to the Tech Talk and add their voice to the Tech Talk. I was going to offer to have a few of the chasers, that there's a number of regular chasers like Christy on here as well. I saw his call sign coming up regularly on your schedule there, to also give their viewpoint of how the Tech Talk went. I don't know, Christy, if you want to just add something before we close.
Evening all. I hope I'm getting through. Yeah, that was very, very interesting and good to relive what we enjoyed with Brandon. Brandon, beautiful, beautiful photos. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone. Good evening, 7-3.
Thank you, Christy. You chase Brendan quite a lot, so it's always a great idea to get a viewpoint from those who are also chasing. Okay, at this point, I'd like to wish everyone a good evening and a final thank you to Brendan and Matthew for hosting the presentation this evening. Good night, everybody. Enjoy the evening further.
Yes.
Thank you, Keith.